Coming up in This Week in Computer Hardware, GTX 960 overclocked, Qualcomm Snapdragon 810 performance preview, Plexor M6E Black PCIe Express SSD is stupid fast, and big rumors on the AMD R9 300 series. All this and more coming up next on Twitch.
Netcasts you love.
From people you trust.
This is Twitch.
Bandwidth for Twitch is provided by CacheFly at CACHEFLY.com.
This is Twitch, This Week in Computer Hardware, episode 302, recorded February 12, 2015. GTX 960 overclocked and AMD R9 300 rumors.
This episode of This Week in Computer Hardware is brought to you by iFixit. You can fix it, and iFixit makes it easy. With free step-by-step repair guides, high-quality replacement parts, and all the tools you'll need. For $10 off your purchase of $50 or more, go to ifixit.com/twit and enter the code TWICH at checkout. And by ITProTV. Are you looking to upgrade your IT skills or prepare for certification? ITProTV offers engaging and informative tutorials streamed to your Roku, computer, or mobile device. For a free 7-day trial and 30% off the lifetime of your account, go to itpro.tv/twitch and use the code TWICH30. And by NatureBox. NatureBox ships great tasting snacks right to your door. Start snacking smarter with wholesome, delicious treats like strawberry Greek yogurt pretzels. To get your complimentary NatureBox sampler, visit naturebox.com/twit. That's naturebox.com/twit.
Welcome to Twitch, This Week in Computer Hardware, Twitch's weekly show that aims to bring you the most useful, most informative, most helpful, and yes, ladies and gentlemen, the most polite PC hardware information on the planet, in the known universe, and any others we have not discovered yet. I'm Patrick Norton, joined as always by Mr. Ryan Shrout of PCPro.com. Are you feeling the pressure to be the best hardware podcast in the known and unknown universes?
No, I'm feeling the pressure of being the most polite, actually. I didn't know that was a prerequisite. Yeah, but sometimes I have smart aleck comments I'm going to have to try to hold back on a little bit tonight. We'll see. We'll see how it goes. I'm not sure if it'll be able to happen, but we'll see.
Let him rip, man. Let him rip. Oh, my goodness. So big story last week. Not the 970 SLI memory mayhem, although that was informative and suggested that you just might want to go elsewhere for your SLI needs if you're, well, let's just not even get into the 970 because I'll obsess over it because I'm fascinated by the 3.5 gigabyte card. But let's talk about something much more cheerful. The GeForce GTX 960 overclocking report, 13 cards tested. This would explain why you were just, when we talked the other day, you just had the look of a man that had been running too many benchmarks for too long. I say that with love and affection, but literally a baker's dozen of GTX 960. This is the $200 car, considerably faster than the 750 Ti, or at least reasonably faster than the 760 Ti. Spec-wise, much less impressive than the 970, but also nearly half the price. So how did the beast, the wee $199 GPU, respond to overclocking? And I'm guessing, based on the stack of heat sinks on those cards we're looking at the top of the article up on PCPro.com, that overclocking was something they were thinking of when they put these aftermarket cards together.
You know, it's interesting because never before have we had so many of the same graphics card in the office at the same time. You know, I've maybe had 4 or 5 of a particular GPU at any given point, but 13 was pretty rare, right? We had 10 of them because Nvidia brought 10 to give away during the GTX 960 live stream we had, and I emailed each individual winner and said, hey, do you mind if I open it up and do overclocking testing? And luckily everybody said that was fine. So we did those 10 cards plus the 3 that I was actually sent for review, and we didn't do you know, a whole lot of games or other testing. It was really just kind of limited to the overclocking capabilities of these parts because we wanted to kind of get an idea of what is the range of overclocking and what is kind of the norm for overclocking on these particular GPUs. That's something that, you know, if you're a vendor, if you're EVGA or Asus or MSI, then you know, you're looking at dozens or hundreds of cards and you're trying to like bend them out and figure out which ones can go which speeds. And if you're Nvidia, you're doing that right at the chip level when they come off the line. So, but very rarely does, you know, a reviewer or a consumer, for that matter, get access to that many of the same product. And so we went through the process of overclocking all these cards, which is because of ever since the introduction of NVIDIA GPU Boost is very simplified. It's very straightforward. You're not adjusting clocks. You adjust offsets, clock offsets. And all of these GPUs, we tested 4 Asus GTX 960 Strix, 5 EVGA GTX 960 SSC, which is super clock, by the way, and 4 MSI GTX 960 gaming cards. And so we used EVGA's Precision X, which is up there on the screen now if you're watching the video version. And really all we didn't change the power target. We didn't change the temperature target because none of these ever reached near those levels, even when they're overclocked, which is pretty interesting. And we increased the GPU clock offset until we hit instability, and then we increased the memory clock offset until we hit instability. And over there on the far right, you'll see a voltage slider that goes vertical, and we just kind of crank that up all the way to whatever the card will be. I think we got 100 millivolts on 2 of the cards and 50 millivolts on 1 of the cards. So a little bit of a variance there, but it didn't really seem to affect much. If you scroll down to the graph of the results and distribution, you will see that so keep this in mind as I mentioned these clock speeds. The rated reference boost clock is 1,178 megahertz. Now, that's obviously a little bit conservative because a lot of these partners are already sending out overclocked parts, but our results ranged from the lowest overclock that we saw was 1,501 megahertz on an MSI card. But the highest one was on an MSI card as well at 1,576 megahertz. So we had a 75 megahertz swing from top to bottom, which is actually a 5% window of the total clock speeds available, right? So even though it looks like a lot in the kind of way we have it graphed out a little bit, there's not a whole lot of variance in these products, right? 75 megahertz from our worst to our best is not a very large swing where if you're on one side, you're totally at a detriment compared to somebody who gets one on the other side. Obviously, there's going to be a little bit of a performance delta there, but not very much. And you can see if you look towards the middle, you kind of get what's average, what's normal, 1544, 1542, 1546. We had several in that range. And by looking at that data, you can see a couple of things. One, the MSI and the Asus and the EVGA cards are kind of all distributed throughout all of it, right? There's not like all the MSI cards are the fastest and all the Asus cards are the slowest. There's none of that kind of shows up. You see kind of a fairly even distribution across the swing there. The blue line that is actually above the green bars represents the temperature of the GPU at that top clock speed. And you'll notice that there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 kind of that are higher than the other 8 on there. And what those are, that's actually the EVGA card that's hitting, I'd say 74, 75 degrees Celsius is as high as we saw that card get, while the other 2 are closer to the 63 to 65 degree Celsius range. So what we did find is the Asus and MSI coolers are more efficient. They're cooling better than the EVGA card, even when overclocked. But that being said, at 75C, that's still fairly cool for an overclocked GPU. And considering that the default temperature target for NVIDIA's case is 80C, we didn't even hit that when we were pushing our overclocks to the maximum level. The only other graph on that page is actually looking at memory performance results, and those have much less variance from best to worst, and they in no way correlate to what clock speeds you got on the graphics card. So we kept those bars aren't in a numerical order; they are in the same order that the GPU chart is above it, and you'll see that the highest end GPU clock only saw kind of a mediocre memory clock increase, right? So if you're running at our top speed there is 2073 megahertz, which translates into 8.2 gigahertz, I guess, total GDDR5 memory speed, which is, the base on this is 7 gigahertz. So you're seeing a 1.2 gigahertz overclock in memory speed. So, I'd say overall, I came away pretty impressed with the overclocking capability. I mean, again, keep in mind, like, if you look at the top mark of 1576 and you compare that to the rated boost clock of 1178, that's a 33% increase in clock speed. that you are
That's
getting.
a pretty massive boost in clock speed.
Yeah, it is, and it puts in, so if you buy a reference card, which there's not very many of the GTX 970, but if you buy one that doesn't have a pre-overclock out of the box, you are doing yourself a fairly big disservice if you don't attempt to overclock it. Even if we say, okay, you're getting 25% out of it, that's a pretty significant difference that you'll see there. So it's worth it to download software. You can use EVGA software or ASUS some or MSI software. And you can do that with any card, really. It doesn't even have to be doesn't have to match software to vendor. And you'll be able to get some fairly impressive performance improvements without doing much work. It's a super easy thing. Like, you're basically moving sliders along. And if you want to not have to screw with it and figure out where it becomes unstable, go towards the bottom of our graph of data, right? We've tested 13 cards. That's in no way an all-encompassing sample size for this, but I think it's pretty good. Another interesting note, people often complain that we get sent, like reviewers will get sent cherry-picked cards that overclock better than everybody else's cards. The slowest ASUS overclocker was the one that was sent to us for review. And I think the slowest EVGA card was the one sent to us for review. And the MSI one was kind of in the middle somewhere. So in all three cases with ASUS, MSI, and EVGA, they did not cherry pick the results for us in terms of they didn't give us the one that overclocked the best or anything like that. So, that's pretty much all the data that's there. There's a little bit more nuance in it if you want to read the story in terms of how the overclocking testing is done and why a GPU, even with the 5 EVGA graphics cards, for example, they all start with the same base and boost clocks. If you set a plus 90 offset, the actual clock speed that results was different for all 5 of those video cards. So there is truth to the, hey, GPU boost is it's looking at the specific ASIC and saying, can I go further at the same voltage levels that I'm at now, or am I going to stress things? So it is kind of looking at specific properties of that GPU before stressing the parts up higher.
So let me make sure I got a couple of these things straight. So the overclocking was kind of all over the map, but these were actually 4 from each manufacturer of the same card, with the one card were 3 of one of the other from MSI, but the only difference in those is the actual color of the heatsink, not the heatsink itself. Okay. Right. So it's kind of funny, like the results in that sense were all over the map, but they were all pretty close. I mean, you're looking at maybe 75 hertz for the largest variation I can see. Maybe
75 megahertz is it. 1501 to 1576.
Yeah. And then, but it's kind of funny. So you have this huge boost in clock speed, but you didn't have a huge boost in performance on Metro last night, for example, where you're looking at
what's important to note about that is that the non-overclocked result is actually still overclocked because it is the retail version of one of those pre-overclocked cards.
Got it.
Right. So we didn't have the problem with GPU boost is that we used to be able to get a pre-overclocked card and then downclock it to reference speeds and kind of give you a baseline for reference. But the way GPU boost works is you can't actually do that reliably. You can set a negative offset and it will start low, but it will always kind of go back up to the high levels. So you're seeing the difference between a pre-overclocked card and then the overclock, the extra overclock that we did there.
Got it. Interesting.
Yeah. So if you start with a card that has a lower, that has a lower base clock, like a reference card, then you will see a more dramatic difference between the two, for sure.
Got it. Plexor M6E Black Edition 256 gigabyte PCI Express SSD review, aka Alan Malventano calls it SSD bling. We showed you pictures of this card basically on pre-sale. I want to say on Newegg a couple of weeks ago. Alan's got them in for testing. A very striking SSD. It's red, it's black. It's going to go great with your insert name of favorite gaming hardware manufacturer here. For example, the MSI card in the background. Scratch off the MSI logos or the Plexor logos, and it'll look like they probably came from the same company. The little aesthetic ridges won't match, but really, if you're worried that much about it, we need to talk about your PC building priorities. 128 gigabyte, 256 gigabyte, 512 gigabyte. Cache goes from 256 megabytes up to 1,024 megabytes. Very similar sequential, pretty much sequential read speeds are going to be the same, 770 megabytes per second maxed out. Sequential write speeds are going to vary from 335 megabytes per second up to 625 megabytes per second. You know, and it's an SSD card. It's SSD storage on a PCI Express slot, which is cool if you are fed up with SATA boards or you've just run out of space. What was the performance story? Did they live up to Alan's expectations, hopes, and dreams?
I mean, it's a really fast product.
Right.
It is native PCI Express storage. That it's actually, if you look at the card, it's a PCI Express card,
Right.
but it's actually just an interposer card that has an M.2 slot on the card itself. If you look at the second page, you'll see the kind of breakdown of it. And so you'll see it's really just an M.2 card, an M.2 SSD that you could put into, like, this particular motherboard has an M.2 slot. Where's it at? Down here, right? And so you can just put it there. But if your motherboard doesn't have that, or maybe you have a video card that covers that slot and you don't want to lose access to it or something, then you can just install it into a regular PCI Express slot. But the performance was identical with this product to a previous product that we've looked at, the Plexor M6E non-black edition, right? That is basically the same thing, except it has a green PCB instead of a black PCB. It doesn't have LED lights on it. And if you pause right there, if you look on the right, there's a SATA power connector in the upper right-hand corner there.
I see it.
That is, you know, they say it's adding supplementary power for the SSD, but Alan got, you know, he talked to somebody and they're like, yeah, no, it doesn't really do anything. It's totally not necessary. The SSD does not use more power than the PCI Express bus can handle. It's not an overclocked product. It's not like an overclocked controller or, you know, overclocked flash or anything like that. It's just there for some reason. Yeah, there's the two products you can kind of see side by side, how almost identical they are. If you look in the upper left-hand corner of the black edition card, you'll see the LEDs are kind of like internal and they will produce kind of like an interesting glow as opposed to just being on the back panel, really. So the performance is still amazing. I mean, you're looking at, you know, 650 to 700 megabyte per second transfer rates in like HD TAC. You're looking at really super low latencies and access times. It's as fast as an M.2 SSD will get right now. The problem is that as of right now, because it's only available on pre-sale, is that the pricing on it is too high. Because the only difference between it and the one, you know, the one with the black PCB and the one with the green PCB is the color of the PCB and the lights and the heatsink. The heatsink of which looks really cool, but again, not necessary, right? It's not a requirement. It's just aesthetics. It's just for style and looks and whatever. But I'm going to click on this link to make sure it was available for pre-order on Newegg. It looks like the 512 gig version is $530. Yeah, it's still there. Actually, it looks like it's now actually available, not just on pre-order, which is a new arrangement. Yeah, actually, it's launch day on the 12th. So if you compare, like, let's say the 256 gig version, you're actually going to pay, if you go from just the M.2 card itself, not with the PCI Express interposer, you're going to pay $80 more total, like $300 for the 256 gig black edition, $220 for the 256 gig M.2. Now, the interposer card is going to cost something, but it's not going to cost $80. And even if you look at the Plexor M6E PCIe, which is kind of like right between those, that's the one with the green interposer card, you're still paying $50 more from the M.2 slot to the one with the interposer card. I mean, that's a little bit more reasonable, but it's still, I think, more expensive than that interposer card needs to be. So, you know, our kind of recommendation here is, like, we like the Plexor M6 product line, the M6E product line, but if you have a motherboard with an M.2 slot, you should use it. You're going to save money and you don't get any deficit in performance. And then if you're going to if you need the PCI Express version, or you want the PCI Express, interposer card version, then maybe wait a couple of weeks, see if the black edition comes down in price a little bit closer to the other cards, and get the one that has the fancy lights and the nice looking heatsink and the black and red color scheme if that fits with what you're going. Otherwise, if you can deal with just a plain vanilla green PCB, I think you'll be just fine with that performance. But hey, anytime I can see PCI Express SSD storage kind of percolate through the system, help competition, help lower prices. I mean, these are things that we need to see in desktop environments, because more and more laptops are shipping with M.2 SSDs. You look at MacBooks and MacBook Airs and stuff; they've had incredibly fast storage because of M.2 for a while, and the desktop users need to be able to catch up to that in kind of a simple, uniform way. And that's why I think most higher end Z97 boards have M.2, X99 boards have M.2. I think the motherboard guys are starting to get it and leave that option open for us.
Big rumor this week, AMD R9 300 series possibly coming soon. Couches, Scott Michaud, Open PC per WCCF Tech. Quote, AMD commented on Facebook that they're putting the finishing touches on the 300 series to make sure they live up to expectation. So Scott adds that I tried to look through AMD's post-2 page for February 3rd, did not see it listed, so a grain of salt is necessary either with WCCF or with my lack of Facebook skills. And then if you scroll down, you see the Twitter, or excuse me, the Facebook posts. Hey, mate, we don't have an official date to share just yet, but the second we know, we will definitely announce it on Facebook. Still putting the finishing touches on the 300 series. So Scott writes, the current rumors claim that the Fiji XT will have 4,096 graphics cores that are fed by a high bandwidth stacked memory architecture. I'm quoting here, by the way, which is supposedly rated at 640 gigabytes per second versus the 224 gigabytes per second of the GeForce GTX 980. So it could have more bandwidth. It could be super awesome. It could be next quarter, which could be a month from now, but we don't know.
We never know for sure. The interesting thing about this is that the AMD on their Facebook page use the terminology the 300 series,
right?
Not a surprise to anybody, but a little bit more of kind of the nudge that, hey, this is closer rather than further away. The ability of, if this actually has the kind of on-package memory systems, it could offer a huge performance boost. But we still had, I think it was a couple of months ago, we had the rumors of 300-watt TDP for the 390X or whatever product, whatever they end up calling Fiji XT. It's a dramatic displacement from where Nvidia is at in terms of their highest end flagship part has 165, 185 watt TDP, and AMD's new one will have 300. You assume better performance. You assume that it will be able to beat the GTX 980 in gaming, right? Otherwise, what's the point? But I will be curious to see when it comes out, if those rumors are true, how it kind of, I don't know, how people will take that response, right? Are they willing to double your power consumption for gaming purposes, right? 2 years ago, I would have said absolutely 100% enthusiasts care about performance more than anything. But clearly, as the GTX 900 series has gained steam in the market, there are other things involved other than just performance per dollar, and AMD needs to be aware of that and make sure they're keeping track of it. But if anytime when they say here, if you read his story where it's supposedly rated at 640 gigabytes per second of memory bandwidth instead of 224, that's impressive. You could do a lot. A GPU can do a lot with that kind of memory bandwidth that we can't do today. So I would love to see that.
I mean, mostly this is a kind of a classic. We're close. We're about to come out with it. We're just going to leak information out there so the enthusiasts that are looking at, $600 or $1,000 GPUs maybe wait a little longer before they buy that Nvidia
It's a risky,
card.
Yeah, it's a risky thing, right? Because you want to cannibalize your competitor sales, but you don't want to cannibalize your own sales,
right?
For example, my wife and I are looking at a Honda Pilot, and then they just went out at the Detroit Auto Show and announced the 2016 model and all these amazing changes that it's bringing it to the line. It's like, well, I was test driving a 2015. I don't want that now. Right now, I'm going to wait. And that's nobody in the industry wants that. But that's kind of the problem that occurs when you have these information cycles.
The dealers don't want that because they have inventory in stock. The manufacturer may actually want something different. I'm also laughing because some friends of mine were just super upset with the 2016 Pilot design because they're like, it looks like a minivan, not an SUV.
Kind of does.
So that may actually spur on 2015 Pilot sales because they want to get the last one that looks like a real truck. But
that's true. No, that's true.
Marketing chess, people, is what you're watching right now. Be funny. It's like, maybe the reason Scott can't find that post is maybe somebody was told to remove it at the mothership.
Weird. Why would that
somebody
happen?
in Canada may have been, what are you doing? Right after they got the calls from Newegg and Amazon and anybody else with a couple hundred GPUs in stock.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. We know you know computer hardware. We know you love computer hardware. Our sponsor, iFixit, wants us to remind you about mobile hardware for a minute, not just buying the latest, iPhone 6 and tearing it to pieces, but all the other phones out there, because they're a little more frustrating. It's funny, we did a segment on Tech Thing last week, the week before, where we talked about, somebody was looking for a PC toolkit, and it's like, you can buy these PC toolkits that have some really awesome things you needed to like swap EPROMs in 1986, but you don't really do a lot of that with modern computers. You don't really need a lot of the stuff in a lot of toolkits. And I'm a big fan of iFixit's toolkits. They're a sponsor, obviously, but I was buying their products, their parts, and their tools long before they became a sponsor because they work. And it's really frustrating. It doesn't matter if it's an iPhone, an iPad, any of the plethora of Android devices out there. People break screens. Batteries, wear out over time. That little switch on the side that you've been flicking back and forth as a nervous habit finally collapses on you, and suddenly, your $300, $400, $500, $600, $700 phone is maybe not a brick, but missing critical functionality like a screen you can actually see. iFixit's all about fixing things yourself, going DIY. And part of that, they have these amazing manuals, step-by-step detailed instructions. And they're doing it actually, they've kind of set up the website so people can submit how to do anything. But what kind of made iFixit famous was first in the Mac and then later on in the iPhone and the Android devices, showing you how to fix things like broken screens. I have bought a lot of screens from iFixit because I break them, which is why I now wrap my phone in armor again. iFixit has dozens of battery and display kits for all sorts of devices. A couple of kits you can take a look at: the iPhone 5S battery replacement, the iPhone 5S display assembly repair kits, and they're really, really nice because they give you all the tools you need to fix it right away. You're probably not going to go down to your local hardware store and find a pentalobe driver for Apple's stupid proprietary screws. You might be able to find spudgers. You can certainly get a suction cup. I don't think you want to deal with trying to find the right sort of fancy, adhesive to hold your parts in. For example, the battery on the iPhone 5S. And what's cool about the iFixit kits is they dump all of the stuff you need into a box and send it to your house. So you're not like, oh, I got to order a screwdriver here and I need plastic here. It's really simple. These are pro-grade replacement parts. They're tested, so you have peace of mind that the part you received works, which occasionally, maybe from some of the online auction sites, you may have a little difficulty with that. Well, we certainly pulled this monitor, this LCD, out of a working phone, and then it arrives with you, and then there's the sort of email thread over, it was broken when it got here. No, you broke it when you installed it. It's nice to have a fresh part that's just gonna work. What's really cool is iFixit guarantees them, so if the part fails, iFixit is going to make things right and get you a part that works. iFixit has great tools, best repair parts, and they also have the best step-by-step guides to show you exactly how to fix the device you're working on. Comprehensive repair guides, like I mentioned, for every single iPhone, iPad, Mac computer, and a growing list of Android devices. And the guides are free. You don't have to buy anything from iFixit to have access to the amazing amount of information on how to repair things they've put out there. Just go to iFixit.com. iFixit makes DIY repair fun. They make it easy. They make it affordable. Do us a favor. Support our sponsor, iFixit. Head over to iFixit.com/twit for all the tools, parts, and kits you need to fix your broken stuff. And if you enter in the code TWiCH, that's TWiCH at checkout, you're going to save $10 off any purchase of $50 or more. That's a nice chunk of change, people. iFixit.com/twit. Use the code TWiCH, TWiCH. You get $10 off any purchase of $50 or more. And we want to thank iFixit, their support, or we should say for their support. Thanks, iFixit, for supporting This Week in Computer Hardware. And thank you for helping me repair so many screens over the last few years. Someday I will own a phone for more than 2 weeks without dropping it and cracking the screen. But
does that mean you're shipping your kids off somewhere else too? Is that basically what that?
Let's just say the biggest mistake I make.
Hold on, guys. I'm going to have to pause you for a moment there. It looks like we lost your video for a second, Ryan. So if you just want to come out of that, it looks like your video is back now. If you want to just ask that question again about his kids, and then I'll cut over to you.
I could do that.
We're going to pick it up from there.
All right. Okay. 3, 2. So does that basically mean that you are giving away your kids? You're sending them off? Is that how you're going to prevent any more broken phone screens, I guess?
I can blame the kids. I can blame the smallest child on the ironically, I can blame the smallest child for breaking the least expensive phone, the Moto G 4G LTE. I have no one but myself to blame for breaking the iPhone 6. And I will say,
that's very classy of you.
I'm just, you know, they're going to be big when they grow up. I don't want them to be, I don't want them ticked off at me for the things they did, not for the things that I've made up. Where we're going, it's purely a safety issue. So you go to buy a CPU, you go to a reputable vendor like Amazon, and you expect to get the part you paid for. It's really simple. Scott wrote this story up on PCPro.com. So allegedly, I like to say allegedly, Amazon UK sold some AMD A8 7600 APUs, but accidentally shipped Athlon 64 X2 5200 plus CPUs. And I'm going to venture to say that's a pretty healthy difference. Quote,
it's a totally different socket and everything. It's a pretty big difference.
That's going to piss you off if you open up the box. You know, quote, despite what you would think, it was actually dispatched and sold by Amazon UK itself rather than a dishonest seller who has some explaining to do. For those affected, Amazon is apparently handling customer service well as expected and promptly replacing the parts. You know, this sucks, right? If you're building a PC or upgrading your computer and the wrong part shows up in the box. One of the nice things about Amazon is they're pretty good with their customer service. I think this was just somebody or some machine put the wrong stack of CPUs in the wrong shelf in a warehouse somewhere in the UK. But yeah, it's ow.
You know, what makes it more, I would say, impressive to me is they didn't just like swap the processor out. They actually delidded the parts and swapped the heat spreader on it so that even the top of the processor has the correct markings for the A8 7600. But if you try to install it in the socket, the pins don't match up because it's a totally different configuration there. So whoever did this, it wasn't an accident. It was very deliberate. And it's hard to see. We talked, it's like, these are not very expensive processors. Right. So how many do you have to do to make this like a worthwhile venture? Right. You know, obviously Amazon UK is going to find out whoever the distributor was that these came from, or which individual seller that's doing fulfillment through Amazon these came from. Right. To be clearly somebody's going to get caught from this, but it doesn't make it any less annoying when you get that part and you're trying to build your system. And you know, you can just try to mash the pins in if you want, but I don't think that would work most of the time. So
interesting question. Yeah, it's I didn't realize they'd swapped the heat spreaders on there. That's a lot of work. I mean, you know,
it's a lot of work. I wouldn't even want to I guess if you've done it enough, it's fine, but it seems like a dangerous thing to remove a heat spreader.
Well, they knew the parts weren't going to work. The parts weren't going to work. It wasn't like it was, oh, well, we're going to swap these heat sinks. I hope the parts work. There was no way those parts were going to work in the motherboard. So
well, then you're once you're the guy, if you're the guy committing the fraud, then now you have this whole collection of A8 7600 APUs that don't have the correct lids.
Well, maybe somebody got a
and now
deal
what do you do
on a
with
bunch
them?
of maybe somebody had a bunch of heat spreaders that looked appropriate. Silk screen. I mean, it just comes down to like, you did a box of A8 heat spreaders fall off the back of a truck somewhere, and somebody's like, this is an opportunity to sell these to someone with an existing distribution relationship with Amazon, so we can make like what, $300 off these. I mean, there's not even like you're going to make a lot of money off this.
Yeah,
I don't know.
Seems odd.
Made to game is what the announcement says. NVIDIA's got an event coming March 3rd. Scott wrote this up for PC Per. Quote, on March 3rd, NVIDIA will host an event called Made to Game. They've been sending out invites to Android Police and others. It appears to have something to do with the Tegra X1. This is the day after Mobile World Congress starts. Scott thinks it's for something else entirely. I'm hoping that NVIDIA joins the HD TV market, or the 4K TV market, or the UHD TV market, the TV market. So it's interesting. So it's taking place in San Francisco. It is close to GDC. Quote, more than 5 years in the making, what I want to share with you will redefine the future of gaming. Our work with Microsoft on DirectX 12 began more than 4 years ago with discussions about reducing resource overhead. For the past year, NVIDIA has been working closely with the DirectX team to deliver a working design and implementation of DX12 at GDC.
That's true.
Yeah.
Those two quotes. So that the first quote is from the invitation. The second quote is from last year's GDC, I believe. It's a really interesting thing. Like the emails kind of, they came in, they got sent to a lot of Android specific websites as well. So that leads me to believe that it's not a DirectX 12 specific thing, that it's more of a Shield or Tegra thing. The idea of maybe it being the Shield 2, or a new, like a Shield console or something like that, like a Shield set-top box. That kind of is what I'm leaning towards, but Scott is making a compelling case for something around DirectX 12, just based on the timelines that he presented there.
Steam box. No, wait, it's not a Steam box, because it's not going to be running, the Steam OS.
DirectX. Maybe. Yeah.
Maybe it's their $400 PC console. I don't know. I mean, you look at what Tegra X1 is. They announced it at CES. They haven't announced any products for it. This would be the first product based on it. They have a habit of making Shield tablet, or the Shield gaming platform was the first or primary products for those. They need to do something like that, if not at this event, at an event soon. Right.
And they would have to have, for it to be interesting, for it to live up to the buildup that they're doing by sending out these types of invitations, it would have to be, if it's a Tegra X1 Android-based gaming console, they better have the most amazing partnerships with game developers and specific game titles that I've ever seen before, because Android gaming has been this eternal flop compared to iOS gaming, even though the power of the SoCs matches the power of what Apple has in theirs. So that's what it is. Or maybe it's, I don't know, it's a laptop or something. I've got nothing. I have no idea. I really don't.
Did you get an invite to the event?
Yeah, I'll be there. It's the first or second day of GDC, and I'm going out to GDC, so that's it's right down the road from the Moscone Center, I guess. So I'll be there for that. And then interestingly, NVIDIA has their own event, the GPU Technology Conference, like 2 weeks later. So I don't know what they're saving for that. Maybe that'll be a desktop product, or maybe it will just be Quadro and Tesla-based parts or something like that.
Could be.
But I don't know. We'll see. It'll be an interesting month for sure.
Lots of travel in Ryan's future. We will have donuts from Bob's. I sense Bob's Donuts in our future. Qualcomm Snapdragon 810 performance review. Ryan, tell me about Snapdragon 810.
So Snapdragon 810 is the latest generation flagship SoC from Qualcomm. It is the replacement for the 805, which was a replacement for 801. So it's like it is their SoC targeted at the highest end smartphones, right? So think the Nexus 6 runs the 805, the Droid Turbo runs the 805, the OnePlus One runs the 801. The 810 is Qualcomm's first 64-bit SoC. And what's interesting in this case is that we're used to Qualcomm's parts using custom-built crate CPU cores. This is actually using off-the-shelf ARM Cortex-A57 and Cortex-A53 cores in a big little combination, which is you've got 4 A57s and 4 A53s that, you know, the A57s are more, have more power or have more performance, but they use more power. And the A53s use less power and have less performance. And you kind of balance which cores are doing what based on the task at hand. And we've learned a ton about big little from ARM directly. And it's interesting because basically what it looks like is Qualcomm's at the point where it's like, I'm 100% sure they're working on their own 64-bit versions of these CPU cores, but they weren't ready in time for this. They needed to have a part out this year. And so we get an A57 plus A53 part with the rest of the Qualcomm stuff that goes along with it. And they've upgraded a lot of things. You've got an Adreno 430 GPU, which is like 25 to 35% faster than the previous generation. They have HEVC and H.265 encoding and decoding support. So, you know, capturing 4K video and playing back 4K video will be much less power intensive on there.
Which is a good thing.
Yep, they've got an LTE modem built into it that supports up to 450 megabits of throughput through carrier aggregation. It's the first LPDDR4 memory controller on an SoC. Right. There's a lot of cool stuff here. You know, a lot of the modem stuff is still over my head. I'm still trying to learn, get my way into that market. But they do also have on the platform 802.11ac Wave 2, which will support the multi-user MIMO. For those routers. And it has 802.11ad, which is the 60 gigahertz or 60 gigahertz WiGig support. That's all built into their wireless chip as well. So not only do you get, go ahead.
I was going to say, I've got to say, like the Flex 2 is suddenly sounding a lot more interesting because it was funny, right? Because we were both at the CES event for Qualcomm. The only thing they held up there physically was a Flex 2. It's the first Snapdragon 810 equipped piece of hardware that anybody talked about. And we knew it was going to be faster, and that was one of the complaints around the original Flex, is it didn't have sort of the top tier performance that everybody had wanted out of that phone. But this is, I mean, it's crazy to look at something that, yes, it's going to be a badass phone processor, but it's going to be a badass tablet processor, but you know, some of the technology inside of this would make for a pretty amazing set-top box. You don't need you know, a mobile part to do a set-top box, but it's kind of a crazy combination, like, you know, dual channel 1600 megahertz, you know, LPDDR4 memory, you know, the H.265 decoding built in. I mean, this is a pretty future-proofed part. I mean, this is way beyond most of what's out there at this point.
It has done a good job of increasing features beyond what I think many people expected, just a slightly faster CPU, slightly faster GPU. And the truth is, you know, we did some benchmarking, and it's important to go look at those benchmarks and kind of see how it stacks up. But, you know, we did it in a reference platform. We don't have a retail smartphone to test it in, because that's really where the rubber hits the road, right? Where you know, was LG able to make a phone out of this that is both slim and attractive and has all the power and features of the Snapdragon 810? And we just don't know that for sure yet. I will say that from our benchmarks, performance-wise, the Snapdragon 810 is very comparable. It's actually faster than the Samsung Exynos 5433, which uses a very similar A57, A53 CPU combo, but uses that Samsung part uses ARM's Mali graphics instead of, you know, obviously Qualcomm's Adreno stuff. On the CPU side, you know, the Apple A8 and the A8X, which keep in mind the A8 is the phone platform, the A8X is the tablet platform. You know, those are still dominant in CPU benchmarks for the most part. And I think that will remain until you get more custom cores built on the ARM V8 64-bit architecture from Samsung or Qualcomm or whoever. maybe even Nvidia for that point. But on the graphics side, you know, it's significant CPU increases over Snapdragon 805 and 801 in most cases. Significant graphics upgrades over those two parts. You know, if you look at Tegra K1, for example, it is still the dominant player in terms of graphics, but they're not in any phones. So it's a trade-off in a lot of ways, right? So yeah, there's one particular test where the Apple A8X is incredibly fast, but you got the two Tegra K1 devices, one using ARM cores, one using Denver cores, you know, NVIDIA's own custom stuff, and then the Qualcomm Snapdragon 810 reference platform right behind it. So it looks like, you know, there were rumors going around over the last week or two that this was a part that was going to overheat. It was, you know, being dropped by people. It is true that it looks like Samsung is not going to use this part for their Galaxy S6, which has been, you know, obviously a huge seller. So that's going to hurt Qualcomm's, you know, financials some and maybe their mind share a little bit more. But you know, you've still got LG, you still got HTC, you still got all the other, you know, handset vendors out there, Xiaomi, those types of things that are they're going to sell a lot of these parts, I still believe. So the loss of Samsung is there. But if you look at it, Samsung probably used Qualcomm's parts because of the advantage that the crate architecture had over an off-the-shelf ARM part. Well, in this case, they have access to the same processing cores. So what is the advantage for using one than the other? You know, it'll be interesting because right now the Tegra X1 uses A57 and A53. The Snapdragon 810 uses the same parts. The Exynos 5433 and the 7410 or whatever they all use the same CPU architecture. So all the differentiation has to happen in different places, except for Apple. It still has their custom designs that they've got out there and are running great. So that'll be interesting. Hopefully, I'm hopeful that I'll be getting one of those Flex 2s this month to test out and try to put, you know, these performance tests and user experience tests really to good use and make sure that all these numbers live up to what you expect to see.
Well, I think it's funny because I'm really curious to see the Flex numbers because, you know, if they do not have to turn down their performance at all to fit it in a package as small, you know, and a phablet's not the smallest package out there compared to some of the cell phones, obviously, but if they don't have to turn down, you know, the TDP to fit it into a phone-sized device, this is going to be a pretty badass part. I mean, because I keep looking at these benchmarks down here, and I'm like, oh, what tablet, Snapdragon tablet, you know.
Yeah, the only other, I think, if you look at the phones in there, we've got the Galaxy Note 4, the OnePlus One, iPhone 6, and then the reference machines. But then there's a lot of tablets in there too, and you know, it's not exactly a fair comparison, but the reference platform for the Snapdragon 810 was available in both tablet and cell phone kind of form factors. So again, we have to wait for the retail release and see how it all stacks up.
We wait with bated breath. Quick, LG, send Ryan a cell phone. So send Ryan a Flex 2. Let me be specific if I'm going to make a random request.
Yes. Yeah.
Hey, I want to tell you guys about one of our other sponsors, ITProTV, a video network dedicated exclusively to the world of information technology. Doesn't matter if you're looking to jumpstart a career in IT or you're already working in the field. ITProTV is out there to supplement traditional learning methods and basically to be fun. You've spent quality time with a manual, right? The idea is that ITProTV is going to make learning the critical Microsoft, Cisco, Apple, A+, CCNA, Security+, MCSA, CIFS, PowerShell, Linux, network security, you know, support for desktops and servers. And the idea is they just don't want to be boring. They're adding like 30 hours of new content each week. They already have hundreds of hours of content up on ITProTV. Shows are streamed live, and then they're available on demand worldwide. Your Roku, your computer, your mobile devices. Chromecast works just fine. If you're watching it live, you can interact with the host during the show. You can get into topic-specific web-based Q&As. You know, the crew at ITProTV are huge fans of TWiCH. They have over 10 years of experience in IT learning. They were inspired by Leo. They use the same studio setup, the same equipment as the people in the Brick House do. They just want to be professional and fun and stuff your brain full of knowledge. And look, you may already have a certification or technical degree program going. You may have a book already. ITProTV, they want you to think of them as a supplement, something to make the information on the page come alive. Real-world examples, people communicating instead of staring at the pages and flipping back and forth over and over again. It's pretty cool. They have their Measure Up practice exams that come with your subscription, a virtual machine sandbox lab environment so you can get hands-on practice, HTML5 support for any OS. It's really, really cool. You get it all for one low monthly price. It includes daily updates and new features monthly. It's comparable to the cost of a study guide, and it's a lot cheaper than going to an IT boot camp. Do us a favor. Check out itpro.tv/Twitch to upgrade your brain with the most popular IT certifications recognized by employers. You get a free 7-day trial when you sign up using our offer code. That's itpro.tv/Twitch. That's going to let you check out their courses, the live streams, and more. Subscriptions are normally $57 a month or $570 for the entire year, but we have a very special offer for you because, again, the folks at itpro.tv are fans of TWiCH. If you sign up now and use the code TWiCH30, you'll receive 30% off your subscription for the lifetime of your account. That's less than $40 per month or $399 for the entire year, and pretty much all the certification learning you can probably stand. And look, once you reach the 13th month, the folks at itpro.tv are going to reduce your subscription rate even further, bring your cost down to $24.95 a month or $249 for the entire year. They keep adding new content because they want to keep it interesting and exciting for people that want to kind of bring their chops up in the IT world. itpro.tv/Twitch, TWiCH, and use the code TWiCH30 to try it free for 7 days and save yourself 30% off your order. If you're looking to get ahead in the IT world, check out itpro.tv/Twitch. Do yourself a favor. Give yourself a competitive edge, people. Edge. Edgy IT. Sorry. IT's tough, man. IT is a very tough place to
I wouldn't want to deal with it now. Yeah. I'm lucky. When the computers here have trouble, I just format them and start over. They're all just test computers. I get lucky that way.
That's why you should be backing things up each and every day of your life. Oh, my goodness. Yeah. So USB 3.1, there were sneak peeks going around at CES 2015. Mr. Malventano got a little sneak peek, got a little excitement. MSI had a cool demo showing some throughput figures, he says, including read and write speeds as high as 690 megabytes per second. That is a huge freaking hop over the 450 megabytes per second we see on USB 3.0. By the way, Apple, anytime you're ready to add USB 3.0 supports into your iPhones, I, for one, will weep with joy. It's pretty cool. So MSI actually sent Alan a rig, a box of goodies to test. So, quote, for those unaware, USB 3.1, also known as Super Speed Plus, while only a 0.1 increment in numbering, incorporates a doubling of raw throughput and some dramatic improvements to the software overhead of the interface. So they're claiming like 2x faster than USB 3.0. It is not the USB Type-C connector. They have nothing to do with each other. If you scroll down, you'll see what I'm pretty sure is Alan's fingertip pointing at the strange new USB Type-C I keep going.
That's actually me. It's almost
that's you.
Me. Yeah,
that is your stunt finger.
I guess I should have cleaned my fingernail a little bit better. Huh?
And that doesn't look dirty. I'm just laughing like, yes, you're all going to have to buy more cables in the future. I've been thinking about that as I've been buying, I think I have $100 in lightning cables already for the new phone.
So 2 cables?
The lightning cables for the new iPhone 6. Don't get me started. That's a lot. I didn't realize how many 30-pin Apple connectors I had in my life until, I bought a new phone. So this is a singling change. It'll work on USB 3.0 ports. So
so it's you got to make sure you separate the two ideas, right? USB 3.1 and USB Type-C connectors are totally different because you'll have Type-C connectors on USB 3 and USB 2. And as we have this motherboard here, this motherboard is a prototype of the X99A Gaming 9 ACK that has USB 3.1, and it's actually these two A-style ports right here. So they just look like normal USB ports, but they have a different controller behind them. They have an ASMedia. What's the 11? I don't know the answer to that. 1325 or 1142. Yeah, there you go.
It's okay, Ryan.
1325 is the controller. And then it just looks like a normal USB cable, right? You've got your USB 3.0 plugs, and then for this particular test, they sent us this little daughter board looking thing that has two SATA connectors hardwired onto the PCB. You hook up two SSDs. In this case, we had two of the Intel SSD 730 series. It puts them in a RAID 0 array, and then it attempts to saturate the bus. Yeah, that's a better picture of it there. But it was all, we weren't actually using the Type-C connectors through any of this testing.
Okay.
Now, if you look through his the kind of results, it's actually I do want to point this out. Like, so they're claiming a 2x improvement in speed, because your USB 3 is 5 gigabits per second, USB 3.1 is 10 gigabits per second. But actually, theoretically, it should be more than that, because they've actually changed the encoding style of USB 3 to 3.1. So as Alan wrote here, it is, let's see, they went from an 8-byte, 10-byte, 80% efficiency to a 128-byte, 132-byte combination, which is 97% efficiency, which means you should actually be able to get closer to that theoretical peak of 10 gigabits per second than you were able to get to the 5 gigabit per second of USB 3.0. Now, that being said, our first results were not reaching those speeds, right? We did see a boost, right? Our regular Windows file transfer is like 600 megs or so. But if you scroll down and look at our Atto results, which is a, like kind of a more synthetic best foot forward test, we're seeing numbers in the 735 megabytes per second range in some cases. And that's, like I said, it's a good 300 megs faster than the best USB 3.0 we have today. And you have to keep in mind, this is the very first generation implementation of the host controller and the receiver, and the everything is early. The drivers are early, the firmware is early, the controllers are early. This is more of a proof of concept and showing you that there are advantages to it. We expect this to be able to get up to a gigabyte per second, probably fairly soon. And obviously, you'll have to have the correct storage on the other end of that. So a lot of RAID 0 devices. We actually have a second USB 3.1 platform we're testing today that has a pair of M.2 Samsung 840 EVOs running in RAID 0, for example. So early results are impressive, but even though you'll start to see like motherboards like this and maybe add-on cards ship with USB 3.1, we don't really have any devices that use them yet, right? So like nobody wants to buy this and hook up two hard drives here and then have to hook up a Molex power connector in order to get USB 3.1 to work. But because we know how popular USB has been and really how quickly, I think we can all say USB 3.0 excuse me, has picked up way faster than Thunderbolt. That 3.1 will be maybe another nail in Thunderbolt's coffin, right? For the almost all use cases.
Well, I mean, as a Thunderbolt fan, it's pretty much, if it's not buried, people have certainly thrown the first handfuls of dirt on the coffin, which is frustrating to say the least, because I think it's a pretty fantastic piece of technology.
Yep.
Yeah, it's gonna be interesting, because it's a big change. It looks like you should be able to just upgrade the firmware, and it's going to bring this to your existing motherboard. That is not what is going to happen, or is it? Or am I reading that wrong?
No, I mean, go ahead.
Oh, no, I was just going to say, I mean, it's kind of funny, because it would almost be nicer if you required the Type-C ports to be able to get it, because then you would have sort of the complete.
Yeah, I think the Type-C connector is going to be what a lot of people are excited about, because if you look at that picture, how thin it is compared to, it's much more in line with the kind of USB 3 micro thing. But it needs to be, one of the benefits of the A styles, it's not fragile, right? You can carry this cable around and you can wiggle it around in ports, and you're not at risk of breaking it. You can see that little piece in the middle there. You are probably at risk of breaking that in many cases. So it's important to realize the potential negatives of that as well. And it doesn't, it's useful for laptops. It's useful for phones, especially. But on motherboards, the back panel, you have plenty of room for standard size USB ports, I think. It's just more of a simplicity thing. Hey, you can't install it incorrectly. Like you can't plug the cable in upside down. So, hey, that's a nice thing to have for once.
It's pretty hard to plug the cable upside down in a USB 3.0, but yeah, micro USB is a hot mess that way.
The old joke, how many times does it take you to install the USB cable in your computer? It's always the third time. It's wrong. You flip it, it's wrong. You flip it, and now it fits, right? So with Type-C, you wouldn't really have that anymore.
That is one of the joys of the Lightning connector. I'll give it that.
Yeah, it really is. So you'd be able to have that with Type-C.
Right.
So I'm looking forward to that, and I can tell you for sure that the second USB 3.1 thing we're looking at does use Type-C. So it's just gonna be a matter of what it is. And I agree with you 100% on the USB 3.0 coming to phones. I don't know if I mentioned it, but the Snapdragon 810 does have USB 3.0 as well. It'll just be, will anybody actually implement that connector? I think people are scared of this connector because it's confusing and even more fragile than just the standard micro USB connector. So, but once you start recording and moving 4K video, USB 2.0 tends to be quite the bottleneck. So hopefully they'll take note.
I think every mobile device should have at least USB 3.0 on it. And if we're literally talking about a gigabyte a second, I am all for USB 3.1. Hopefully, There'll be a PCI Express adapter. That's all I'm going to say. I had to add this one in because I just thought it was fascinating. This has popped up kind of everywhere on the web in the last couple of days. It's the Tactus Form iPad mini case. And if you click on the link there, it's pretty crazy. It looks like a case, right? Well, do me a favor. Click on the link on the left side. I apologize. I found that later on. But those buttons down there you see at the bottom of that screen you're looking at right now are not there normally. Basically, when you need a little tactile response, the buttons will pop up out of this cover, right? So it's a big case for an iPad mini. Reminds me of the old OtterBox Defender cases, not in terms of durability, but in terms of sort of the shape and feel. And it's the craziest thing. They use microfluids that are stored in one corner of the enclosure, and when you need a sort of a proper keyboard, they flow into the keyboard. And the buttons kind of pop up in place. You can just see them right there.
What the hell?
Yeah, look at that. Isn't that crazy?
That's so cool. Hey, it's that guy that's in every video for every new product. Anyway, go ahead.
But yeah, look at it. See, there it is. It snaps on it. And look, you have buttons. Isn't that crazy? I just saw that and I just had to share that with everybody.
Sorcery.
What sorcery is this? Yeah, it's going to be $149, which is pretty healthy for a case. But they're pre-selling it on their website, Getform. That's PHORM.com for $99. I'm kind of curious.
I only have one complaint. No landscape mode.
Yeah. Well,
I'm scrolling. I'm looking to see if there's any kind of answer for that, but it doesn't look like there is.
No, you'll notice all of the pictures kind of involved.
Right. Yeah.
The device in portrait mode. I thought it was really interesting. It's
they had one for the iPhone 6 Plus too.
Really? I didn't realize they had one for. Well, I don't have an iPhone 6 Plus, and I'm not going to buy one at this point. But it's going to be available summer 2015. For that cool case. Oh wait, color. Slate gray. iPad. No, I'm seeing iPad Mini, Mini 2, Mini 3. I thought it was interesting if they. Yeah. Well, I thought it was interesting if they chose the iPad Mini as the first one. And so it's a lot of the people writing about this have pointed that out. They would have expected the iPad Air, simply because it's bigger and less traumatic to type on. But maybe they thought there was the most dramatic difference, or maybe it's just cheaper to put enough microfluid inside of.
I would guess maybe it does have to do with the portrait versus landscape style. More people use their iPad in landscape, maybe, I don't know.
Could be. Microfluidics. It's kind of crazy because inside the screen or the tactile layer, there's just little tiny fluid channels, and the top layer is polymer. So when you turn it on, it just pumps it up.
That's weird. That's really cool though.
Yeah, it was a gee whiz moment I thought was worth sharing with everybody. Yeah. They happen. I have my gee whiz moments. Twitch at twit.tv is the email address. We love your questions, and we invite you to send them in. I apologize. We usually try to get a question or two in from the chat room, but I am chat free this evening. So, chat room, say nasty things about me in chat, but I will take care of you next week, I promise. We got an email from Eric about the GTX 960 in 4K. Quotes, I'm in need of a new graphics card, and I've been looking at the GTX 960 or 970. I want to be able to do some gaming on the computer, but gaming in 1080p is fine for me. But I want to be able to run Windows in 4K and some other programs like Photoshop. Will I be able to do that with a GTX 960, or is the 970 worth the extra money? You can spend $60 to buy a GPU that will do, desktop computing just fine in 4K. It's when you want to accelerate, Photoshop, or when you want to game in 4K that I'm going to say, I feel comfortable in saying at this point, if you want to game in 4K, save up the coin for a 970 at the very least.
He says he wants to do gaming, but gaming at 1080p is fine. So I guess he means he's okay gaming at 1080p and then having it upscaled to 4K. Right. I will say you can absolutely do that, and the GTX 960 would be plenty fine for that and would have no problems doing it. Just keep in mind that in our kind of use here, what we have seen with most of these 4K monitors, well, okay, I guess he doesn't say what 4K monitor he's using. 4K monitors that have scalers, probably it looks fine. Like if you have like a monitor that doesn't have a scaler, maybe like the G-Sync 4K, things can look a little fuzzy because the algorithm that Nvidia is using for its own GPU-based scaling of that is not fantastic. But a lot of the other 4Ks that we have used and use here will take a 1080p video or whatever and scale it up just fine, right? So if you're actually gaming at 1080p, it should be fine. And it's a simple 1:4, quadrupling of resolution. Mathematically, it shouldn't be very complicated for a display to do that. So if that's the case, then a 960 would be fine. And keep in mind that if you bump up to a 970, even really a 970 isn't going to be enough to really game at 4K. You'd have to go to a 980 or above to really, it doesn't mention what game specifically, but I would hesitate to say, yes, a 970 will do 4K very well. It could, but it would be a struggle for it. So I would either say go with that 960, do all your productivity stuff in 4K, game at 1080p, have it upscale, or you're gonna have to make the jump all the way up to like a GTX 980 or a Radeon 290X or something if you wanted to actually game at the native resolution.
Most of the UHD televisions at this point have decent 1080p scaling. They have to in order to survive, right? Because, Blu-ray, cable, satellite, the vast majority of everything is still 1080p. In terms of monitor scaling, what have you seen? Have you seen any monitors, doing 1080p scaling that just made you want to beat your head against the table, or have most of the early ones been pretty good?
Most of them have been decent, at least. I will, like the G-Sync 4K was the worst experience we had with that, but that's really because it had no internal scaler. It was dependent on the GPU to do the scaling, and it's not something that has been really tweaked. And it's actually a hardware filter that handles that on GeForce parts, so they can't just kind of change it in software with a driver update. Got it. But everything else has been fine.
Good to know. Yeah, no, I love my 750 Ti and my inexpensive gaming machine, but I keep thinking just a little more power. I'm warming up the GTX 960 that I do not need but want. We got an email from Chris about the 840 Evo. He says, "Hi, my name is Chris." Hi, Chris. And I was curious if you guys knew if the slowdown affects the mSATA version of the 840 Evo or if it's isolated to the SATA version.
It definitely affects both.
Okay.
Yeah, it's definitely both. And the update tool from Samsung should work on the mSATA as well. It's really the same interface electrically, I think, or at least to the host operating system. So it should work. It is affected, and so that's something to keep an eye out for. If you have one and you haven't updated the firmware, you should probably go ahead and do that, and then keep an eye on things. Yeah,
keep the utility around just in case.
Yeah.
If I'm not mistaken, for people who are listening to the audio version of the podcast, you did not see Ryan just take a giant draw off his water bottle.
It is water.
Ryan,
it is
your
water.
thirst is quenched. Are you feeling hungry, sir?
Well, I'm never not hungry, I guess, is the right answer, which makes this appropriate for this particular ad spot for us, NatureBox. This episode is brought to you by NatureBox. Right now, NatureBox is giving you a chance to get a complimentary trial box of their most popular snacks, and you pay only $2 for the shipping of these things. Life is hectic, and it's hard to make the best snacking choices. When you're looking for a quick pick-me-up, do what I do. Get delicious, healthy snacks at naturebox.com. NatureBox has hundreds of delicious, nutritionist-approved snacks. They've got 0 artificial flavors, colors, or sweeteners, 0 grams of trans fat, and no high fructose corn syrup. You'll even find snacks with the bold flavors you crave. So in the afternoon when you're hungry, do what I do. Grab cinnamon spiced almonds or sriracha pop pops or cranberry pepita crisps. Actually, I had some of the very simply named dried pineapple, which is not dried to the point where it's like pineapple chips, but it's more like gummy pineapple. But it's literally like, I love reading the ingredient box and it just says pineapple, dried pineapple. And it was really, really good. And I'm going to have to get some more of that. It would definitely have to happen. So, you're going to snack. Get smart about it with NatureBox. Start your trial today and get a complimentary sampler box at naturebox.com/twit. Stay full, stay strong, start snacking smarter. Go to naturebox.com/twit, and we thank NatureBox for their support of This Week in Computer Hardware. Those all look really good.
Yeah, they're all really delicious too. I was laughing when we had a box of those come in my old office, and they disappeared in 2 hours. Like people were wandering by our cube.
Yeah, they're perfect too, to like not just steal from your neighbor's cubicle, but to take one with you to the office. So if you get them delivered to the house, take one with you on the way, so that between lunch and dinner you're going to have something. Now you've got it, and it's in a prepackaged bag ready for you to take with you. And really, I would highly recommend, if you're a fan of pineapple, that was really good stuff. I wonder if I could just order a box of only that. I probably could if I ask real nice. Yeah.
Get yourself some pineapple. I've got an interesting question, or actually an interesting email from. Sorry, I just had a moment where apparently I breathed too heavy, and the entire there it is.
Your document went away. Oh
yeah. I'm just gonna stop breathing near my computer for a moment, and hopefully it'll stay there. But anyhow, Lord sent us an email. Since it's here, I'm going to start reading it before it disappears again. Google Docs, or Google spread. In any case, it's virtual documents. Yeah, cloud documents are my bane. Lord's got a really good idea for Linux storage. He says on episode 281, Patrick and Alan were talking about episode REFS. And on Windows and how it stores data on multiple drives. On the Linux side, he notes, there's a storage system called Greyhole. Greyhole.net is the website, which uses Samba and operates very similarly from the sounds of things to ReFS. It's a really useful option for creating a storage solution at home. Much like ReFS, you can take a drive out of the pool and just read it on another system, unlike a RAID or RAID-Z array. So it's cool. There's some really interesting software tools out there for making it easier to back giant amounts of data up on your machine, or just store massive amounts of data on your machine. Thank you.
Interesting name. I guess it's better than black hole, which would be when you just lose all of your data into the nothingness.
Gray holes, it comes back. Black holes.
I don't know. I'll have to read the about page and see if they give us a reason for that naming scheme. It's kind of funny.
I don't know. Now I just want to see what gray hole the Urban Dictionary is, and if I suddenly turn pink.
I was gonna say, make sure you don't just immediately begin to read it out loud on the show, because you just never know what you're gonna find on Urban Dictionary.
A gray hole is an object from which matter and radiation escape, rise to a certain distance above the event horizon, and then fall back in. All right. I'm not going to read the second one on that list, though. The second thing on that list.
Not show
appropriate. My mouth washed out was so.
Not show appropriate.
No. No, not family friendly.
Oh,
We got an email from Eric about an uninterruptible power supply UPS. What should I think when I'm buying a UPS? What kind of battery time can I expect from a UPS when having a screen and a desktop computer connected to it? My computer has a 660 watt power supply, but never really pulls that much. Do you have any recommendations for a good UPS around $250, preferably available in Sweden since I live there? You know, one of the easy ways to find, because we're in the United States and I can't really guarantee something is available in Sweden, but one of the nice things about Amazon is it's available everywhere. So you can look for the best-selling UPSs on Amazon. That'll give you a good idea what people like and what people don't like in terms of regional brands or, you know, Northern European brands. You know, if it's got 3,000 positive reviews, probably safe to trust. The issue with the key thing to selecting a uninterruptible power supply is the more you spend, the bigger the battery you get, the longer your computer will run. And so if you're sitting here thinking like, you know, the fjord ice broke, stopping the hydroelectric generation for my community, and I want to be able to finish, you know, my raid before I shut my computer down in the gaming sense. You're going to need a really big uninterruptible power supply to keep your machine going for a few hours, generally speaking. And, you know, whether it's like, you know, like here's one of this CyberPower CP1500 AVR LTE CD intelligent backup. Like, you know, most of these are packing what they call an alarm battery, which weighs about 2 pounds. You know, it's got a very finite amount of electricity stored in 12 volts. It's converted fairly efficiently to the 120 volts that your PC and your monitor need, or, you know, I assume 220 volts in Sweden. You know, but you're generally talking about minutes, right? It'll kind of hold on during a brownout, but the alarms will go off. If the power shut down, if you have the software installed on your computer, it will gracefully start, you know, shutting down all the applications to avoid the maximum amount of trauma. You know, if you're, you know, if you've got code compiling and it's going to compile for 2 hours, you're going to need like a couple of giant car batteries to keep your uninterruptible power supply running until that code finishes compiling. You know, the biggest thing is like, look at the devices you absolutely need, which is basically, you know, your PC box itself, maybe your monitor if you want to be able to watch what's going on. Most of the well, a friend of mine used to be like, oh, I'm not going to. Well, back in the days of the big CRTs, and the CRT drew a lot of power.
True.
He was like, you know, I want to give PowerShoot as much time as possible. PowerShoot's the software from APC, as much time as possible to gracefully, you know, save everything out and shut it down. And this was in the days of, you know, this is a long time ago when, you know, when monitors weighed 70 pounds and were much deeper than they were wide, and hard drives were slow. So he basically plugged, you know, the computer into the uninterruptible power supply, and if we had a brownout or a blackout, he just stepped away because there's nothing to watch on the screen because the screen went black. You know, but he then that way he gave his computer the most time it needed. But pretty much every uninterruptible power supply company will give you like a checkbox page on their website that will be like, I have this, I have this, I have this, I have this, I have this processor, and allow you to figure out how much uninterruptible power supply you need, how much battery power or battery storage you need to back up your device. But generally speaking, until you get into the kind of stuff that, you know, gets delivered to your house on a truck with its own forklift to be mounted on your specially prepared concrete floor, you're not going to have enough power to let something run more than a few minutes or maybe an hour on the outside. You know, generally speaking, you know, then there's a lot of sort of DIY ideas, but I will say if you build your own DIY uninterruptible power supply out of deep cycle marine, car, or RV batteries, just do it right and do it in an area where you won't burn your house down if things go wrong. Just saying.
Looks like my video froze up there again. I'm not staring at you in such an angry fashion right now.
I was like, what did I do, Ryan?
It was very there. Oh, now it comes back. Okay, great. I will say that the one stat that you see listed, like 1500 VA, is a very common like stat. That's volt amps. It doesn't translate into watts. right? It's like, I think kind of like a rule of thumb is a half to 2/3 of that, you know, is going to be what you could get actually in wattage out of it for a traditional kind of PC configuration. So, you know, let's say a 1500 volt amp UPC would be able to supply 1,000 watts of power, but then the size of the battery will determine how long it could supply that. And I will tell you, 1,000 watts, the answer will be not very long. Yeah. Yeah. So, yeah, keep that in mind. And then, you know, you'll just look around at other, you know, like you said, I don't know what's available in your particular country. I have used everything from the Geek Squad Best Buy brand to Cyber Power to APC, and I've had moderate success with all of them. The one thing that I have not issues with, but complain about, is that the batteries go bad. Like, they will eventually kind of die, because as all batteries do, they just wear down. And especially, I think it's, I mean, we all know it's not good for a battery to be at full charge all of the time. But when you have a battery backup, you want it to be at full charge all the time. Otherwise, what the hell's the point of having a battery backup? So, you know, that will be, I would say I've replaced batteries on some every once in a while. And those are very large and very heavy and very expensive. But your data and your computer hardware is going to be worth more than that.
Yeah, I will say some of my favorite IT geeks, especially the ones that operate in the server rooms, a lot of them are like, once the battery's worn out, I'm buying a new UPS. I think that's a little belt and suspenders for most people. I'm pretty comfortable with replacing a battery in a UPS. The other thing to talk about is sort of what they call offline or standby versus line interactive. And the third one would be double conversion. Double conversion's super, super awesome. So that basically, like, there's an inverter. Basically, there's a charger on one side, the batteries, and an inverter on the other side, and you always are running your devices off the battery, right? So that is the platinum plated, super awesome standard that, like, you know, hospital equipment, serious, you know, data warehouses and stuff. You're not going to have. You could have one of those in your house, but it's probably going to cost as much as a small used car or a medium-sized used car. Most of the ones you're going to see are line interactive or offline or standby ones. You know, the offline or standby ones are the super inexpensive ones, the ones that are sort of the cheapest available. You know, and basically, they rely on a switch. And when the power goes out, the battery goes on. They're not particularly sophisticated. They don't usually do any line conditioning or anything like that. Line interactive UPSs are the next step up. They sort of have an auto transformer built into it that will kind of keep the output voltage of the transformer in the same range, a little more sophisticated, and help you deal with some power issues in your area. So if you have a brownout, you know, a buck boost transformer or that's inside the line interactive UPS will do its best to keep the current steady without actually cutting off the charging to the battery. They're pretty cool. You know, I like that. They are. I think if you take your data seriously, and if you have data that you carry about, you should take it seriously. Spend a little bit of extra money for a line interactive if you can. But yeah, it's funny. Like, I'm looking at the UPS advisor on the Cyber Power website, and it's kind of funny when you start, like, you know, UPS applications, desktops, you know, workstations, mid servers, mid to high level servers, mission critical and enterprise data center applications and equipment, 0 millisecond transfer time and equipment connected to generator. You know, this is one of those things where you can spend pretty much as much money as you want. And most of us will not need sort of hot swappable batteries inside of our uninterruptible power supply, but the options are there.
They are.
Just interesting stuff. I'm going to step away from the interactive chart here, because I'll start researching. It's like, oh wow, look at that one. And by the way, if you are smart, you will connect to your Ethernet line to your desktop PC. I'm assuming none of you are still running modems, but there's a reason they have sort of a pass through for an RJ11 jack for a phone and Ethernet and cable lines and such, because they want to protect all of the potential sources for like a strike. They're like surge protectors that way. They basically want to protect your computer from hideous overvoltage surges off of any of the devices connected to it. So, if there's an Ethernet pass through on that, use it, because it would be really sad if like lightning hit and the power went out. And the lightning over the Ethernet wiped out your computer, even though the lightning over the actual plug in the wall did not wipe out your computer. Yeah, saw some ugly things involving lightning when I lived in Pennsylvania and computers. Just
fair enough.
Bad.
Yep.
So, Eric, hopefully that was not entirely too much information, and I apologize for not having a deep understanding of the Swedish uninterruptible power supply market.
It happens.
I tried, man. I tried. So what's coming up on PC Per this week? What exciting things? Can you talk about anything?
There's so much. Like I look across the office and there's so much stuff sitting in here needing reviewed. We've got the Dell Venue 87000 still. We got the Dell XPS 13 still. We got in 21x9, 3440 by 1440 LG IPS panel. We have some more USB 3.1 stuff to get to. The Nook, the Broadwell based Nook is still sitting out there. I really just need to write for about 100 hours and figure out if I can get any of that stuff published. So we'll see how it goes.
Just have your sleep removed, man.
Yeah, that's true. That's a good 6 hours a day that I could get back. You're right. 7 if you count preparation and stuff. So yeah, that's a good idea.
Sleep removed, stop eating, ignore the dogs. You'll have plenty of time.
Perfect.
And the basketball, is the basketball season over yet?
Oh no, it's not over until early April. Got till early April for that. Yeah.
Oh my goodness. So tech thing this week, I'm just gonna say it right now. Chances are you don't need to spend more than $25 for a router. We'll tell you why this week's edition of Tech Thing. Mr. Ryan Shrout joins us to talk about GPU picks for your PC if you're looking for a gaming upgrade. And it turns out kill switches have radically cut down the amount of phones that are stolen in places like LA and London and the Bay Area. It's crazy. Smartphone thefts last year were like 50%, or the year before, like 2013, I think they were 50% of the recorded or reported crimes in the state of California. So if you want to find out what a kill switch is and what it does for your phone, go check out Tech Thing this week at techthing.com or youtube.com/c/techthing. It's exciting.
Yep.
All these exciting advances in phones and processors, and I just want to go upgrade my system now.
You can
do problem with this show. So I don't know. Usually some shows I'm like, okay, I'm good, but now I want a new GPU, and I'm just going to leave it at that because you've rubbed off on me, Ryan. I always want a new GPU now.
It's not my fault. That's not my fault.
No, I'm going to blame you. I'm not going to blame AMD. I'm not going to blame Nvidia. I'm going to blame you. And on that cheerful note, thank you so much for watching this episode of TWiCH, This Week in Computer Hardware. If you want to find more episodes of TWiCH, you can find them all at twit.tv/TWiCH and information on how to subscribe. If you want to find Mr. Ryan Shrout, you can find him at PCPer.com or at Ryan Shrout on the Twitter. It's interesting. That disappearing cell on the spreadsheet just disappeared again. If you want to find more of me, and I can't imagine why you would at this point, it's techthing, TEKTHING.com or at Patrick Norton on Twitter. And I'm going to say that's it for this episode of TWiCH before the strange, disappearing, exploding spreadsheet on Google eats my face. Thanks, everybody, for listening. I'm Patrick Norton.
I'm Ryan Shrout.
We'll see you next week on TWiCH.